Prelude to the American Revolution by Jack Dragani and Max Wolfe. The Navigation Act of 1651. Laws passed in the English Parliament in 1651, 1660, and 1663. The purpose of these laws was to encourage British shipping and allow Great Britain to retain the monopoly of British colonial trade. They prohibited the colonies from trading with the Netherlands, Spain, France, and their colonies. Salutary neglect. Salutary neglect was the unofficial British policy of avoiding parliamentary laws meant to keep American colonies obedient to England. Salutary neglect was a large contributing factor that led to the American Revolutionary War. Salutary neglect lasted from the 1690s to the 1760s and benefited the colonists by increasing their profits from trade. Proclamation of 1763. The Proclamation of 1763 was issued October 7, 1763, by King George III. It followed Great Britain's acquisition of French territory in North America after the end of the French and Indian War. It forbade all settlement past a line drawn along the Appalachian Mountains. Sugar Act. The Sugar Act was titled the American Revenue Act of 1764. On April 5, 1764, Parliament passed a modified version of the Sugar and Molasses Act. Under this act, colonial merchants had been required to pay a tax of 6 pence per gallon on the importation of foreign molasses. Sugar Act took away the colonists' right to a jury trial and also raised the issue of unfair taxation. Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty were a group of shopkeepers and artisans in Boston in 1765 who called themselves the Loyal Nine. They were established to undermine British rule in colonial America and was influential in organizing and carrying out the Boston Tea Party. They began preparing for agitation against the Stamp Act. As they grew, their group became known as the Sons of Liberty. Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was a law that required all colonial residents to pay a stamp tax on virtually every printed paper. This included legal documents, bills of sale, contracts, wills, advertising, pamphlets, almanacs, and even playing cards and dice. The money collected by the Stamp Act was to be used to help pay the cost of defending and protecting American frontier near the Appalachian Mountains. Quartering Act. The Quartering Act is a name given to a minimum of 2 acts of British Parliament and the local governments of the American colonies to provide the British soldiers with any needed accommodations or housing. It also required colonists to provide food for any British soldiers in the area. This was passed on March 24, 1765. Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre was a street fight that occurred on March 5, 1770 between a patriot mob throwing snowballs, stones, and sticks and a squad of British soldiers. Several colonists were killed, and this led to a campaign by speechwriters to rouse the ire of the citizenry. Gaspee Affair. The HMS Gaspee was a merchant ship off the coast of Rhode Island which angered the colonists. The Sons of Liberty set the ship on fire, and no one knew anything when it came time for trial. This all happened June 9, 1772. Tea Act. The Tea Act was the final straw in a series of unpopular policies and taxes imposed by Britain on the American colonies. This angered the colonists and was the start of the Boston Tea Party. It granted the British East India Company tea a monopoly on tea sales in the American colonies. Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was a political protest by the Sons of Liberty in Boston on December 16, 1773. The Sons of Liberty dressed up as American Indians, and it was symbolic of the colonists' willingness of how far they were willing to go for their freedom. The Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts was the American Patriots' name for a series of punitive laws passed by the British Parliament in 1774 after the Boston Tea Party. They were meant to punish the Massachusetts colonists for their defiance in throwing a large tea shipment into Boston Harbor. First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress was a meeting of delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies that met on September 5th to October 26, 1774 at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, early in the American Revolution. George Washington, John Adams, Samuel Adams all attended it, while the colony of Georgia did not. Bibliography.